Hi there, and welcome back to another project update for my large-scale Killa Kan. Currently the hip joints are just telescoping tubes that aren't a particularly tight fit. This means the can body has a tendency to tip due to its weight, so my plan is to replace the hips with a similar method to that which I've used on the shoulders. My first task was to saw off most of the existing tube, leaving just 5mm protruding. I bought some brass shaft couplings and cut some 45mm lengths of 3mm axle, and filed some flats in line with the grub screws to prevent the axle coming loose in the future. The couplings aren't a tight fit in 11mm tube, so I covered them in heat shrink with a dab of super glue to stop them slipping. Once trimmed, I was left with this. The coupling was then a very tight fit into the remainder of the tube coming out of the hip, but for good measure I also glued it with a bit of 2-part epoxy. I then prepared another coupling with heat shrink, this time opening up access to the screw holes. Next I cut a length of 11mm tube and made corresponding holes in the side. The coupling was then glued into the tube, ensuring the screw holes were aligned. This coupling can now fit onto the stub of axle and be locked in place by tightening the screws. Before gluing the coupling into the upper leg, I needed to make a couple of access holes for the screws. This was done very carefully using an 8mm drill. I then cut a couple of lengths of 8mm tube, glued these into the holes and filed them flush. The coupling was then glued into the upper leg, lining up the screw holes with the access holes. Next I moved on to the lower legs. Starting with an elbow joint that fits onto the 20mm pipe I'm using for the main leg shafts, I cut off the 2 straight sections. I then used some 0.5mm strips to build up additional stepped layers around the tube. I sculpted the vertical pieces using some 2-part modelling putty, with some hex rod for the bolt heads. These were then glued onto the top of the main leg shafts. I then made the framework of the collar that would sit at the bottom of the main shaft to support the 2 smaller side tubes. I used strips of 1 and 0.5mm plastic to form the sides. Once the glue was dry, these were filed and sanded smooth. I could then assemble the legs. The main shafts would be glued to the upper leg with a couple of small locator pegs for strength. With the side tubes in place, the lower collar could then be added. The leg was then glued onto the stub I'd left protruding from the ankle joint. Of course, all this had to be done for both legs. The legs were then attached to the can body, and with its new hip joints I'm pleased to say everything seems stable and able to support the weight of the body. Well, that's all for now. I hope you've enjoyed this update. Till next time, thanks for watching.